Hello everybody, I'm going to be reading from a script, so my eyes are going this way. Line in the Sand is a satirical window into the British Colonial Office as they attempt to carve up the Middle East at the end of World War I, having promised the same land to many different conflicting people. It places the player at the desk of a British diplomat drawing lines on a map to define the boundaries of new nations. You've got limited time, little knowledge, and racist bosses. What could go wrong? There are two types of scene in the game. In the first, the player converses with the other characters in the game, diplomats, generals, leaders, and their entourages, establishing their interests and defining your objectives. In the second scene, the player is given a clean map and must use their mouse to draw the boundaries of new nation-states to be assigned to the powers that you've decided to appease. Who gains the oil-rich fields of Western Hale? What about the highly strategic Gulf of Aden? Are the states that you've crafted sustainable with access to water, arable land, and naturally defensible territory? Do they match the cultural existing boundaries? How will you honour the conflicting promises made during wartime? After all is said and done, are your boundaries going to survive the test of time? The game is split into several levels and will run as a loose simulation tracking how you've divided land and who you've assigned it to. How you act shapes the story, but there are no right answers and no solution will please everyone. As British presence collapses around you, how will your borders fare? The game explores the theme of who defines a nation-state. So a nation-state is this ideal where cultural boundaries match the lines on the map. This is an ideal where cultural boundaries... There! I got distracted. This is an ideal because this obviously doesn't really exist anywhere, but the history of the nation-state is exemplified by European and particularly German nationalism as leaders realise that by creating a strong sense of national identity, they can exert power over significantly larger populations. One of the best ways of doing this is by contrasting with the otherness of other nation-states. These nation-states are so incredibly effective that they start expanding to claim more land for their resources so that they can become stronger than their rivals, becoming empires. This system inevitably leads to massive wars and falls apart in the last centuries, leaving huge territories with artificial borders created out of desire for resources rather than creating their own national identities. Territories that once had their own social systems make deals with former imperial masters to create their own nation-states, but this process is completely bungled as conflicting powers lay claim to the same land, and those with the power to choose completely fail to understand the problem. Today, we have a Kurdish populations either side of Turkey and Iran. Iraq's religious community is completely divided. Scotland and Northern Ireland feel increasingly more bonded with Europeans than the British identity, and the religious balance in Palestine is completely upset by the declaration of a Jewish state by the British. This same dynamic is playing out all over the world, but these are largely British-made problems. We used our power to create a shitty world, and we're going to keep paying the price for it for the foreseeable future. Although I'm using a specific period in history to tell my story, I could have picked anywhere: the scramble for Africa, the partition of India, or I could look back to Roman antiquity, or forward to Russia's annexation of Crimea, China's annexation of Tibet, or Brexit. The dynamics of the nation-state system are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago. Tonally, I want this game to be a complete farce. The colonial powers completely failed to replicate the social structures that led to their own successes in the places that they colonized, and this is a terrible irony that is not lost on me. As much as I want to poke fun at the incompetence, incentives, and prejudices of the British civil service during this period, all comedy is underscored with the frightening realization that the events parodied led to immense humoring suffering and some of the most conflicted areas on the planet today. I'll be leaning on 10 years of experience using the Unity game engine and using the Ink scripting language for massively branching interactive content. I want to produce something with genuine appeal, with engaging gameplay, beautiful art, and a colourful cast of characters. It'll be a short experience produced for web so to reach as large an audience as possible. That said, I'm not a visual artist, sound designer, or writer. I am pitching this so I can hire those people to fill those roles for me. I design systems. I see my job as one of designing systems for players to explore, telling stories using rules, the language of interactivity, stories that can't be expressed in any other medium. If I've done my job right, I won't have guided my audience to a clear conclusion, but broadened their understanding of the power structures that continue to underpin conflicts around the world today. Thank you.